Hello, hope you're all well. Mrs. Boys and I thought it might be nice if we recorded some chapters of our class reader, Max and the Millions, and then we can set some work based on the story. So I'm going to start the story at chapter 1. I know some of you have heard it at school, but it'll remind you, and for children who've not been in school, then they can join in as well. Okay, so this is Max and the Millions by Ross Montgomery, chapter 1. Mr. Darragh was building a world. He was building it in his bedroom, which was the biggest in the boarding house. The room was as cold and as bare as a cellar, with high ceilings and uncarpeted floors. Mr. Darragh had asked to be moved somewhere better, but the headmaster had always refused. After all, the headmaster would say, "You're just the caretaker." Mr. Darragh wasn't just anything. He was a genius. Unfortunately, nobody knew it but him. After tonight, that was all going to change. Mr. Darragh gazed at the miniature world on his desk. It was a little tray of sand no bigger than a book. Inside were hundreds of tiny palm trees, each one made by hand and the size of a matchstick. They'd been planted in a ring around a green lagoon. It glimmered in the lamplight like an emerald dropped on the sand. There was no doubt about it. This was Mr. Darragh's masterpiece, the greatest model he had ever made. Other models filled the shelves above his desk. There were hundreds of them, piled on top of each other from floor to ceiling. Model boats, model planes, model palaces, monuments, dinosaurs, skyscrapers, each one smaller and more perfect than the last. But that was nothing compared to his latest creation. It was paradise, and it was almost complete. There was just one thing left to do. Mr. Darragh opened a drawer beside him and took out a pair of metal goggles. They had two thick lenses and were covered in switches and wires. He pulled them on and pressed a button on the side. The lenses shot out like telescopes. Mr. Darragh was proud of his microscope goggles. After all, he had built them himself. They were priceless. But just like the serum, Mr. Darragh picked up the tiny bottle beside him and held it up to the light. Less than a thimbleful of liquid lay inside, but the colours shifted and clouded in a pattern of millions. Mr. Darragh carefully swirled the bottle, merging red, then green, then blue before the colours separated again. It had taken him 20 years to find the serum. He'd never expected to get his hands on so much and of such perfect quality. But even so, he had only one chance to use it. He tilted the lamp over the sandbox. The lagoon shimmered. "Light and water," he whispered. "That's all it needs." Mr. Darragh swallowed. 5 years of construction, 20 years of planning, it had all come down to this one moment. He tried not to think about what would happen if he used too much serum or too little. Or, and it didn't even bear thinking about, he dropped the bottle. Mr. Darragh unscrewed the lid, took a deep breath and leaned over his greatest work. "Oh well," he said, "here goes nothing." That's the end of chapter 1.